Welcome to part two of tonight's candidate one-on-one interviews. Tonight we have Adam Roberts, who is a resident in North Kansas City and proprietor of Screenland Armor, with us. Adam, thank you for joining us this evening. I know that you're running unopposed, but I appreciate you being here regardless.
Yeah, for sure. I think I expected to have somebody run against me, so I'm like, well, let's go. Maybe I'll never do this again. So let's go through all the emotions, just like everybody else, right?
Exactly. So, what in the world made you
Mm.
decide to run for council in North Kansas City?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's kind of like like most things in my life. Like it just became an idea that snowballed into reality. But I've been a resident for the last couple of years, so I guess since 2017. But I've lived here on and off throughout my adult life. And I've had a business here since 2012. So I've been in the community. I've lived here for quite some time. And then just by owning a business here, you have to deal with city officials, city administration, and of course, city council. So I kind of knew the inner workings just from having reached out to people and worked with certain individuals over the last couple of years. And I had good experiences and I had bad experiences. And then over the last year and a half, 2 years, really. Just on a national and state level, I've been more engaged in politics and in different organizations, and I think that all kind of snowballed into maybe I'll run from council, and then here we are. I'm doing it. So it just kind of felt like an organic process throughout the couple of years. First being a businessman in North Kansas City, then a resident, seeing what's happening, what I could maybe make better, or how I could do things in a different way. And then, yeah, certainly like late 2019, 2020, as things were getting more political for everybody, I got even more engaged. And I think that made it so I was, I think, a day one applicant to be a council person. And I think I'm ready to take the charge, to make my mark on this city in a different way.
So, when you first told your person, whether it be your best friend, business partner, life partner, what was their response?
Um, I think I want to say I offhandedly mentioned it like 2 years ago to Ashley, who's my girlfriend, and she was like, "Yeah, do it. I mean, why not do it? Like I'm because I'm already, I think, plugged in so much that it's like it's not that different from what I'm already doing. Especially 2020. Like I was on a lot of council meetings just to work on different things for not only my business but other local businesses and kind of shape what was changing in the craziness of the pandemic. So I was already doing those things. So I think when I initially mentioned it, it was well, yeah, you're already kind of doing it, so you might as well be doing it full time with a title, right? And I think that's how any kind of part time or hobby even hopefully translates, right? We all hope to one day make that a profession or career of ours. Whether you're a hobbyist as a writer, you one day want to make a sale as that same writer. So it's kind of the same thing. Like I'm already doing the thing, so I might as well have the position of such. And yeah, she's been super supportive. Everybody's been supportive. I think flashback to me in like high school, I was like 15, 16, and me, I took debate 3 times throughout high school. So I was, whether I knew it or not, I was more plugged in and engaged, at least in how, research and conversation and like engaging with other people's politics and ideals that I don't necessarily agree with. And the thing about high school debate is you get topics that are random. So there are things that you have to defend that you may not personally believe in. So that's always a good, like, I think, block builder. And that's been like my whole adult life, I guess, is like learning these different traits and working with different people. Even prior to owning my own business, I had worked in corporate America. I've worked for small business owners. I've done kind of everything. At one point, I was going to be a fireman. I've did it all to where I have this like weird plethora of experience and life knowledge, even at a young age, that I think it all makes sense to why I've kind of came to this moment as a future city council person.
So you've lived in North Kansas City on and off through your adulthood and you're settled here. Um, What was the biggest draw in your decision to move to North Kansas City?
Well, so I grew up in the Northwest. I grew up most of my adult life just outside of Parkville. So I was just down the road already, right? And then, like any 20 something, I traveled downtown and, lived in Westport, on the West Plaza, lived in downtown proper. And then, at some point, like mid 20s or so, I was like looking for other places. And this kind of felt perfect because of the highway access, because it was so centrally located to places like downtown. You didn't have to live in downtown and try to find a good place. You could live just outside of it, just a couple minutes away. And, that was like 2008, 2009. And so much has changed in not only North Kansas City, but the whole metro area. And, but that was just kind of what brought me here initially. And I spent a couple of years here. And even then I was like riding bikes, down Swift. It was like, oh, this is great. You can take a bike to the river market and go grocery shopping, on the weekends. And stop by and grab pizza or barbecue or whatever it is. And that became kind of like this is neat. And then when I had the ability to take over a business here and make my own mark here, it was like, okay, well, trying to live here permanently was a long-term goal. And I only moved out of here for like 2 years before I made my way back up north. And I tried to find a house, and I think I bought my first house in 2014, I think, and it was just outside, just by Old Briarcliff. So I was as close to Northtown as I could possibly get. But there was just no houses available at the time, and I had to move. It was that situation. So I bought something close until I could find something properly here. So I've been either right here or directly in here since really like 2008 or 9, except for maybe 2 years when I was in my old house. But I just loved it. I love the walkability of everything. I like it feels like this weird, almost cinematic city to live in. Like it feels like you're in a town in a movie. And you have, especially on a Friday night when the football's happening, it's like you hear the noise in the background. It's like you're in Friday Night Lights. It's like you could walk to a library in the middle of the town. I don't know. It's just like no other part of the city has these things or this vibe. And, I'm a big fan of fall, and I think we have one of the best autumns here of all the region, and the differencing of the houses and the trees and stuff. And it all kind of culminates in all the things I love. And it's continued to move forward in things I've learned to love. I've become more of a biker. I rode my bike for my entire life, but I never really considered it like real transportation. And now it's like, oh, I could go to restaurants, bars. I can ride my bike to work. Like most of the days, I walk to work. Unless I have to go do errands or something. So those conveniences are just you can't really trade them in for any other part of the town. And seeing the area continue to grow and thrive with new young businesses and small business owners is going to make this place even greater in the long run. So yeah, it's exciting, and it continues to be every day. Like this is the correct decision that I made to live here and to have a business here. For me, it's like I don't really ever leave. Like some people might travel out of these 4.5 square miles to go work somewhere or spend their time or whatever it is. But I live and work here, and I can walk to my business in 10 minutes or less. Depends on what my speed is that day. But I am really here all the time. My friends own businesses here that I go to. I can go see music here. I can get just about everything besides the inevitable grocery store conversation I'm sure will pop up at some point. But we can do it all, and that's like kind of a cool thing. But I don't really ever leave these streets too often because we just about have everything I need personally here.
My favorite thing to do, Robert or Adam, I was looking at your last name. It's all confusing
Yeah.
when I'm looking at the screen. So when I'm in the mood and the snow is falling and it's that crisp air, my favorite thing to do is I literally walk from my house down to the movie theater. There's something about especially at Christmas time with the Christmas lights and then the marquee of the movie theater and that whole block right there. It's my favorite time, especially when it's pitch black outside and you've got
Yeah.
the snow falling. It is my favorite thing to do in the winter.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of moments like that for me. But you're right. Like even though I see and I engage with our building and our marquee all the time, there's still something about like walking down Armour Road, in the fall or when it's snow and it's almost pure silent. and you have, the city decorations up, and all, it just kind of is a perfect fitting. And it feels like, again, it feels like you're not in a real city. It feels like you're on the back lot of some movie set, because it's so magical in a lot of ways, and you can't really replicate it. It's like a cool dive bar, right? You can't go make a new dive bar. You have to. It's got this lived in kind of historic feel to it. That's just like, it took 100 years to get to this vibe, and it's really hard to replicate. And a lot of places try. Like, you see these new small communities, they try to make this type of environment, and that you really can't, because part of it's like, well, you can't just make a tree 75 years old, right? and part of it is that, like, how many trees we have and how grown in they are to the community. You go 10 or 15 minutes north of here, in a lot of these newish neighborhoods, and new meaning like 20 or 25 years, and they just don't have the same aesthetic. They feel just so cold and desolate and boring.
And the architecture of these buildings
Yeah.
that we're in, it's the whole package deal. And yes, it is very cinematic. Um, which I'm going to kind of jump ahead a couple of questions, because one of the important questions that I know for me is important is, how do you take this over 100 years of history of this town, the architecture, the history, the stories, the lives, the people who lived here, and
Mhm.
bridge it over into the new century that we've just embarked on, and preserve parts of it. So what is the one thing that you would want to preserve from our history as we move forward?
That's a good question. So, we've so I operate a business that is essentially 92 years old, right? So, being in a historic location is my day in and day out. And how do we preserve that? And how do we keep the legacy alive, but while also being modern and leaving our own personal mark? And I think that's always the case. So it's not really like, when I think of like Northtown, I don't really necessarily think of one particular thing that's historic, but it's the city itself. So ensuring that, like, we're not, coming in, and this is, I don't think anything that's going to happen probably anytime soon, or hopefully ever, but that we're not wiping out, massive blocks of streets to put in new housing, because that'll just look weird, right? Like, getting rid of these trees, getting rid of, like, a lot of these historic buildings and houses. So I think maintaining as much of our environment and keeping it as I guess as particular as it is right now, while also finding ways to move forward, like things like the streetcar. And, like, Burlington is all and has always been a pretty horrible eyesore. Like, so that's a place we can improve that doesn't really diminish any of our historic designs and what the city actually is. And then same thing with, like, complete streets. So I think we can add things on that aren't really touching any of our historic past, right? Which a lot of it is our architecture, our trees, our parks, things of that nature. And I think everything else, we're in the right direction. We're going the right ways, and we're adding them on in a way that I think keeps that same kind of vibe, which is important. Like, there's certainly versions of complete streets that don't fit in, but I think that what we're doing is tonally correct. It feels right. It feels that small town vibe still. Like, you see, especially the crosswalk, on Iron and Armor. It's just, like, really neat, and I think that fits perfectly with the small town vibe. So I think as long as we keep the tone of the city with any future projects, and that even means, where possible, when new developments happening, that we're considering keeping interesting artwork, keeping the vibe alive, and ensuring, from a green perspective, that we're planting new trees and other greenery, so that we're, doing our part environmentally. But I think we're on the right track. I think all the things that we're doing, I think there is heavy consideration in this community, in this vibe, in protecting our greens and things of that nature. So, that's what, I guess, the most important thing to me. There's not anything else in particular, but ensuring all those things are kept preserved and then maintained as we continue to build out the infrastructure. And I guess if there's one thing that's kind of a bummer, it's been like the potential for One North. It feels so tonally different with the city, like from the architecture just to, like, how broad and wide everything is. As I mentioned before, like, those broad, wide, like, communities we see in, like, north, the very Northland, like Liberty and the like, they just don't fit in really with our aesthetic. So I hope we can find a way, and the developer can kind of marry what this city really feels like and the vibe that the city has to really make that fit in whenever they get closer to the final look and design of the whole development.
Well, that brings up something that and I love that we're doing a conversational interview as opposed to timed questions and so forth because we get to elaborate a little bit. But look at the architecture of the addition to the high school, and I'm disappointed. I'm going to be very honest about it. It doesn't fit. It looks very office building-ish. Whereas you've got this great, wonderful historic school, and I get what they're doing inside, but the architecture doesn't match. And then we've got this building that burnt down at Armour and Swift. And I'll be candid, I'm concerned about what could be built there and will it preserve the look and feel of that historic corner of our town.
Yeah, I mean, first the high school, like, there's still a part of me that's like, well, maybe they're not done. I always thought, like, that the outside what we see was going to be covered with brick to match,
Yes.
and it wasn't going to be a full brick building, but because it kind of looked like they were going to do that, and then they never came back, and I was like, oh, part of me still hopes that they do,
Darn.
that they match it in, but I don't know really what the school district plans are, and maybe that is something long term they're looking into. But I've heard, but it would be ideal if they did bring that aesthetic, because again, to match our weird cinematic universe of North Kansas City, the high school looks like every high school in every movie. Like it is like, I love bringing people here because especially if you just walk around the streets, people are just like, what is this place? Because it's got that enormous, like, beautiful front, like, sconces, and it just, like, the massive entrance. It does look, and it's like beautifully curated lawn and the trees. It does look like it's out of a movie. And then you're like, walk a little further, and you see the beautiful library. But yeah, I mean, the building that burned down that's been vacant, it is like, well, they could do so many interesting things in there. Whether it be, of course, like we've heard everything from, like, put a park there or something like that. But it is, a business property right now, at least. So, the easy thing is to just rebuild the boring corporate offices that were there, and that's fine, I guess. But I think that they have an opportunity to do something more interesting, to maybe bring back some, I guess, historic feeling architecture to that area that isn't this very 1980s brick, boring corporate building. So I do hope that they change that. And I think maybe, I don't know what their plans are for that, but I do hope that, especially on Armour Road, it is such a picturesque, street. Like that whole like block, a couple blocks right there is just so perfect, I think. And so, to always look back on former pictures, it's great because Armour's, like, kind of transformed, but also kind of not. Like, it's pretty cool to, like, see, 1920s, 60s, 80s, and now, and, like, big small differences, but it still remains that, like, Main Street USA kind of vibe that isn't really complete anywhere else. Like, maybe like downtown Parkville kind of has it, but it's that hill kind of also kills it and makes it, not so, and it's so much smaller. But I do hope that they do something interesting. I'd love to see more interesting retail put in there. I think that's a more probably community driven prospects there. There's very few retail outlets available in that area, and I think that would definitely help the entire area. And it's just a little more interesting. Putting an office building in there again is like, okay, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I would love to see them do something more interesting. I'd love to see more retail. I'd love to see more retail in the whole city. Which means just more activities, more opportunities for everybody. If we can get a couple clothing stores or jewelry stores or or what have you, it just continues to incentivize other people to come here because, oh, well, they can make it a day out. They can see a movie. They can go have lunch. They can go to a bike place. They can do all these things. And shopping is, like, kind of the thing that we have a black hole in. There's a couple spots, but certainly more retail shops, I think, improve overall aesthetics of downtown, but also help all of our surrounding businesses continue to make it a day out.
Absolutely. I I will be candid once again. When Marodi's opened up, I kind of hoped that Hellsberg would reopen their retail location because Hellsberg's world headquarters is right here in North Kansas City. And I still long for that a little bit. I think it would be so cool to be able to go in and shop in Hellsberg once again, even if it was just very small and limited. Um,
Yeah.
appointment only. I don't care. I just think it'd be great to be able to have that little bit of competition between two local businesses that are historic to North Kansas City and the surrounding areas. So you, as a business owner, have had to pivot. The whole world has pivoted this last year. Um, what did the pandemic teach you about leadership?
Well, so I mean, fortunately, a number of things have happened throughout my, at that point, I guess 8 years of being a business owner. The first being that, I took the big hardest step you can take, which is step off the ledge of security of somebody else's paycheck into your pockets, right? And I did the plunge and started my own business. So I took the hardest thing I could do, and then you learn throughout the years. I've built and closed a number of different businesses, and for various different reasons. But I had done it before, so it wasn't the first time. So I knew what kind of went into that and how to handle it emotionally. But I vividly remember March 16th being here, going back and forth with all the different types of things I could be doing. Talking with, for us, it's talking with studios because we have all these contracts, we have these like schedules to put out, we have all this stuff. We're scheduling people to work, all these different things, and everything's falling apart. And then it's okay, talking with my bank, talking with local representatives and state representatives, trying to figure out what's happening and how serious things are really going to be. And then I remember that night at like 9 o'clock, and things coming out from people I know in downtown Kansas City that it's probably going to close tomorrow. And I remember, like, really, is that going to, like, it didn't seem like a realm of possibility of that happening. And I do remember spending all the next day, okay, I think it's going to actually close. So we canceled, we started planning, like, okay, let's pull back on all of our inventory. Let's not order any, do all these things to reduce our overhead costs as quickly as possible. And then it became at 9 o'clock that night is when Q spoke and it was like, tomorrow, we're closing these, and these. And then the next thing, it was like, okay, well, I need to talk to my staff. I need to make sure that they know what's going on. I need to make sure that they're as best taken care of as possible. And part of that was kind of easy. We did have an advantage of, we have a full restaurant bar. We had one in the Crossroads. So we had a lot of food. We were able to send all of our employees at both locations home with food that otherwise would have spoiled. And then we gave some away to local food banks, but we were able to make sure that they were at least fed, because we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know how long it was going to last. We prepared everybody with a week's worth of food, which is about what we had. And then it was, we don't know how long this is going to be. We're talking with the state. We don't know what unemployment's looking like. We don't know anything that's happening. So bear with us. I'm going to keep you up to date as best as I possibly can. And that's just what I did. Like, every day I was researching, learning, staying on calls with all sorts of different people and educating and trying to figure it out. And it was very tough. It was hard to manage and, make the first thing I could. I got everybody on the unemployment and then the shared work plan. And then eventually we got PPP, but it was, and we brought it right back as soon as we could. But it was, this delicate process of like trying to keep your cool, trying to keep your shit together in a way. But you have to be able to work diligently with your bank, with the government officials, to get all the correct information, so that what the decisions I'm making for my employees, for our landlords, for all of our bills, are the correct ones, and we're not, sinking our ship preemptively. So, and then from there, it was a crazy year because, and it still is a crazy year. We did close one of our businesses. Unfortunately, we owned an arcade and restaurant in the Crossroads. That wasn't cheap. And we had actually celebrated our 5th anniversary at that place a month before we closed for the pandemic. So that was heartbreaking. I mean, it was a place we literally built up from the ground up. And we had to close that in August because business was just terrible. And it was the correct decision, but it was a very tough decision to make. But every day that went by since then, it's more and more evident. We're sitting here almost in April, and we closed at the end of August. So we're 6+ months removed from that, and we would have lost $100,000+ had we just tried to stay open. And part of leadership is knowing when to say when and to call it, and to understand that is the correct decision. It's not too often that you tell that to your bank and your bank says, I think this might be the correct decision. But we did that, and we made sure that where we could fill in all of our full-time employees with other jobs. And that was tough. You're trying to find jobs for people in the service industry when the service industry is destroyed. And we tried our best with that as we could. but it was really hard. It was tough. It was tough to keep everybody in the know. It was tough to keep everybody employed, and it was tough, for me. But I kind of came last. I wanted our customers to know what was going on, so we did a ton of Facebook Live videos. I wanted to help all my friends that own small businesses that I knew might be overwhelmed themselves, and I was doing ungodly amount of research on like grants and things like that. So I wanted to be able to help them where I could. And then it was making sure that we're going to be here for the future, and so all those things kind of tied together. And then and we are still here. It's been a crazy year, and it's still going to continue to be a crazy year. Today a bunch of wrenches got thrown in the movie industry's continuing to be chaos. So we're looking forward to a better summer, and now it's starting to look like it'll be a better fall, maybe, but I don't know. So, but we're here still, and we pivoted. We closed businesses, we opened outdoor, we kind of did all this stuff. We launched an online business. We I don't even know. It's just like the amount of stuff we've done. And we're a small team. We don't have somebody that does marketing, somebody that does this and this and this. It's like me and a couple other people. Brent, who's the other co-owner, he took his job full time back with his family's company doing sheet metal work, because that's the kind of like sacrifices you have to make to ensure your business is there for your employees and is there for the community and your customers. And he's still there full time, and probably will be for a while, so we can make sure our business is healthy to be here for the future. And that's the biggest thing is maintaining that level of health and communication. That's like the biggest thing. Always with leadership, and you're trying to find the best communication for your employees and your customers. And certainly you get busy. The good days. You look back to 2019, you're like, I did a pretty good job, but I was also overwhelmed, overworked, and it's in a lot of ways. The pandemic's kind of, I think, forced a lot of us to re-examine our lives, both like in our careers and our personal lives and our friendships and all this. And I think in a lot of ways, where we are now and where I am now professionally is better off than where we were in 2019. Of course, my tax return might not say that, but I think business-wise, like, we feel healthier. I feel more energized. We feel more focused. So there are positives, and it's good to look at the positives and to look to the future, I think, optimistically. Certainly we could sit here and talk for hours about how crappy last year was, but that's not going to do anything proactive, right?
Not at all. So when you think about the future of North Kansas City, what makes you the most excited?
We've been doing stuff that's completely correct. Like being on the forefront of Complete Streets will inevitably bring us the streetcar. It will. It might not be next year. It might not be 5 years, but I think in the next 10 years, we will have the streetcar here. And long term, especially when you're looking at business owners looking to move here, they look long term. They look at their neighbors. They look at their upcoming neighbors. They look at the potential. And the potential is there. And I think Complete Streets will make that happen. And if the streetcar comes up here, that is a total game changer for not only the citizens of the community, but for anybody who works here. Transportation is going to be significantly easier. It's going to, help eliminate emissions, which is always a good thing. But it's going to create a big opportunity to really marry us with downtown. And that's been, the biggest hurdle for a lot of business owners. Not so much now, but 8-9 years ago, it was, you're in Northland, you're in north of the river, you have to cross the river. And I think just having the Complete Streets already tie that together with the bike lanes to, the beautification and the Complete Street projects for Burlington, I think all of that goes into really tying into downtown and making it feel like a seamless flow into, we all know, a cooler city than Kansas City, Missouri is properly, but it all goes into the same thing. So I think the most exciting things are those things that we're doing. And yes, there's some headaches with them, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that I've loved every detail of Complete Streets, but the good thing is with any project, with a lot of people involved, you can continue to get better. And I think that's what we are doing as a city. We're making the small improvements. We're looking towards long-term viability. We're connecting things. We're figuring out that what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And most importantly, we're listening to the business owners and the citizens and their complaints and their ideas. And that's how you really make a good community. And as somebody who, especially in the pandemic, has walked hundreds of miles in these streets and bikes probably, the same, it's continuing to evolve in this community and this destination to where you can be outside for free and do all these cool activities. And if you want to, you have so many unique businesses, like our OKC was the first RKC here. And it was a very unique business. I was a member for a long time and up till the pandemic started. But, having just all these cool little things. And when we get rabbit hole, and a family could come up here and they're going to want to throw their bikes on the back of their car or get bikes so they can bike around the city and stop in Iron District. And then they go to the rabbit hole and then maybe climb some rock walls, and do all these cool things, or just, again, for free, bike around and stop by all of our cool, very different parks and hang out for the day. And so I think we're already on the right track for all these things. So it's finding the ways to improve it, to expand it, and to create. So in 10 years, we have this fully connected to downtown community, and people don't look, oh, you're across the river. It's, oh, you're in the coolest part of downtown or of Kansas City, right? And people associate it with the central part of all the metro area, which is what we are. We're much easier to get around than Kansas City, Missouri proper is, downtown proper, because we have all these roads connecting things, these highways, and that's what makes it so attractive for people to cut through the middle of the city. But I think we're on the right track. I think those are all the things that really make me excited to be able to one day hopefully ride my bike down the road to the corner of Armour and Burlington and throw it in the streetcar and ride it downtown all the way to the Brookside one day. Like, that is the coolest thing, to be able to do that. And I think we have to keep working to build that complete streets so that these projects make sense for the community and for the all the partners involved, the state, the city, the federal government, grants, all these things. And I think we're on the right track to impressing them. I think we consistently impress on a national level.
About 8 years ago, I did this beautiful little map of North Kansas City and how long it would take to get to the stadiums, Overland Park, the zoo, Sprint Center back then. It's always going to be Sprint Center, whatever. Sandstone, the airport, and literally we're pretty much 20 minutes from everywhere. And
Yeah.
when I tell people, if I get out of the parking garage downtown after having a concert at Sprint Center, I'm home in 5 minutes. Literally.
Mm-hmm.
The longest thing it takes is getting out of the parking garage. When I think of moving back out to Smithville, it's like, oh, that's a 30-minute drive just to get to where we can go anywhere fun. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. North Kansas City, it's proximity and with the highway structures around us, and literally right across. We're not in Iowa. We're just across the river. So, I think that it'll be exciting when the streetcar or light rail, you could hop on it here in North Kansas City and even not have to pay an Uber to get to the airport.
I know that's the big dream, right? But just how, and I think we're putting the right bricks down to make those, if those opportunities come up, a reality. And I think that they will want to come up. Just like, I think North Kansas City is becoming a common place and destination for people in the entire metro area. They know us now, right? There's enough different things here for them to know. And I think, rabbit hole is going to be one of the last pieces to that equation that really cements there's a lot of stuff to do here, including a lot of family friendly stuff. So I think once that's here, you're going to see a lot more businesses start popping up in support of all this and long term. And again, we're not talking tomorrow, but I think in a year from now, and had the pandemic not happened, we would have continued to see significant growth, just like downtown Kansas City is. And this is all going to just delay it. But I still think, because our area is so small, there's only so many places you could go, and they're going to go quick. And you're going to start seeing a lot of these warehouses recognize that the property value is significant. And, maybe they don't need the whole footprint. So we might hopefully see some transformations of industrial footprints into more commercial or retail, which could be exciting in itself. I see Swift similarly. There's been a lot of people that are well, we already have a handful of businesses on Swift. They're working and to try to bring more and more stuff there. And the pieces, it takes time, but having Schmecka's and Lucky Elixir and Velo, those places that are already destinations in themselves, we just need a couple more in there, and you start to build a real Main Street of sorts, like a lot of these cities have, that not a lot of places in Kansas City can do. So I'm very excited to see what Burlington looks like in 5 to 10 years from now. But I think that all goes together with having these, very bikeable, very walkable, very cool community streets that are safe and comfortable and inviting. And of course, the rest of the city is already that way. So it all connects into the excitement I have for, seeing where we are in 5 to 10 years if we keep these pieces going.
So, as you are well aware, Armour Road had a lot of varying opinions about how it was redeveloped and the communication surrounding it. It was a real hot topic. What do you think could have been done or could be done in the future on future projects, because you've named a few, that could alleviate some of that dissension?
That's the hard thing, right? As a business owner, you recognize that no matter how hard you market, how many outlets you go to, there's going to be a bunch of people who still don't know who you are or what your messaging is. I know because I've literally done a million news interviews, print interviews, you name it. I've done it 1,000 times consistently for 10 years. And yet there's still a lot of people in Kansas City that don't know what Screenland is, which just baffles me. We have this massive social footprint. We do spend all this money on marketing, and there's still people who don't know who we are or what we do and how we do it. I think you have to recognize that it's impossible to reach everybody. It's impossible to educate everybody. But most importantly, I think we have a lot of resources and avenues for people to get the correct information. It's just they might not know that they exist. So there's certainly a lot of people who will complain without looking in the right areas. But we do need to do a better job, I think, in educating our community on who does what and how they do it, and also where things are done, right? So there's a lot of people that don't really understand what city councilmen people do, and also what happens in City Hall and who's doing it, because there's a lot of different things that happen and then also the Parks Department, right? Because there's 3 big separate entities and they're all kind of doing different things, but it seems like they're all correlated. So I think first there's education on who does what, how you can reach out to them, because everybody's accessible either by phone or by email. And of course the pandemic scrambled all this, right? And made it only so we have these types of interactions, which aren't ideal for everybody, or Facebook, which again, not ideal for everybody. So I think when things start getting back to normal, we have resources we can use, and maybe they're being utilized already, things like the library, the high school, things like that, where we can put information that is available by the city and for the community. We all get letters, monthly or quarterly from the city that kind of says what's going on, but a lot of that is after the fact. It's not leading up to it. So I think that there could be a change in that, and looking more long-term, that hey, this project is coming up, look for details at future meetings. And then, whether it's the textcaster or maybe it's an email, even newsletter sign up or something like that. I know Jesse Smith does a great job with his newsletter and sending it out to his ward already. And, I'll probably do something, piggyback on that and do something similar with my own flavor. But I think it's just getting it out in different avenues and educating where those avenues and where those people are, because they're all there and they all want to help you and listen to you. But you don't all know where and who and how and what, right? And so it's just education, because I certainly didn't know really, until a couple of years ago, what the city administrator really did until I had to work with them, or what, there's so many people at City Hall, they're like, oh, they have somebody that does this specific thing that I need. Public Works, for example, has somebody that you can contact. You can certainly contact a city council person, but they're going to just give you the correct information and avenue to go to the Public Works Department. So I think it's education. It's making sure that if we have stuff at a place like, the library, that people know that exists and it's advertised. It's not just under some, folder behind this closet, right? So it's making sure that those are visible and seen, and even things like, I know Wes has said having a suggestion box out there. I'm certain that you could drop. I know all city council people have mailboxes, for example. I know you can send mail to the mayor. I know you can get mail to all the city officials. So it's making sure that people know that they could do that already. It's nothing new. He's not creating anything new. Those ideas already exist. So it's just educating that, yes, you can already physically mail me something. You can email me something. You can call me. And that goes for all the people in the officials. So that's the first thing, is just getting the education out there to make it less, I guess, scary to reach out to people and to get the information or help or to push your idea, because sometimes it's just an idea. And how many times have all of us had ideas where, man, wouldn't that be awesome if we had this? Oh well, it's like, well, no, just send me an email, especially if it's an idea. Like, cool ideas, we're all in a community here, and everybody's unique, and if you have a cool unique idea on how to fix something, make something better, or change something, certainly don't not let somebody else know. So I think it all comes down to education, and then reevaluating what we already have, and especially the newsletter that goes out and that we all look at. I think there's a better way, even if it's at the same thing every month, in the back of it, in the front of it, whatever it is. Here's how you contact everybody, which I think there is some of that already in there, but here's what people do. Here's resources, whether it's at City Hall exclusively or the library, that it kind of dictates where you can stay up to date, where you can let your voice be heard, and in what ways. I think that's the best way, because we're already doing it.
Well, and certainly you and I were part of Zoom meetings where we discussed the parklets, and we were able to move the needle, and the city was able to pivot in the pandemic during this, just after the stay-at-home order, to allow us to reevaluate how we could stay viable as businesses. And that came out of who does what, and who do you have that conversation with, and you want to be careful that because you don't want to go over someone's head when it really, because sometimes you don't need to go to the top dog to get the answer that you want.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, yeah. I mean, that's a great example of parklets. I mean, it took a couple Zoom meetings, and, Kim Nakahoto, she knocked it out. She was boots on the ground, willing to listen, active, and did it faster than they did in Kansas City, Missouri for all those businesses. So that's the beauty of North Kansas City, is how small we are. That we have our own government is a mega plus, because you have, somebody covering only, 4,800 people or whatever it is right now. You have this small group of people that you can reach out to and get a response probably within the hour, but certainly within the day, especially from, full-time city officials. Having had a business in Kansas City, Missouri, and having lived there and had issues, it's pulling teeth, because they're, trying to wrap their hands around hundreds of thousands of people, and they don't have, 500 people doing that. They have a couple people. So having people like Kim Nakahoto as a resource is awesome. And she has great ideas and is very forward thinking. I'm certain that she's just on like whatever the most hip, city official things you could be doing around the country. I'm sure she's always looking at those, so that we're on the forefront of these things, not just in Kansas City, but I think on the nation. Like, we're doing things that are ahead of the curve, which is really cool. And we can do that because we have some funds, because we have big businesses around the corner, but we also have a great city admin that are looking out for these cool new projects that we can be on the forefront from. And that means they're not always going to be perfect on day one, right? Armor Road isn't going to make you happy on day one. It was a shock, right? It was like we all woke up and it was like, what? It was like waking up to a snowstorm when it was supposed to be 70 degrees. But then a day or two later, we all started to figure it out. A week or two later, you kind of forget about it. And then now, a year and a half or whatever it is later, we're all kind of enjoying it. Right? And certainly during the pandemic, I'm thankful that we had even the portion of the complete streets we had, because I was walking around all the time and, riding my bikes and enjoying all of it. So I was certainly thankful for it. But yeah, I think our city admin rules.
Well, and certainly being I don't even know what it is. We have 4,800 people and Kansas City proper has 450,000 people.
Yeah.
That's a cruise ship compared to our speedboat.
Yeah. Hell yeah, we're a speedboat.
So, what's the biggest asset that you bring to the table as you're running unopposed? So, you're going to be on our council. What's the biggest asset that you bring?
You say you're like, so you're running unopposed. Everybody watching's like, leave, leave it.
Wait, no, we got more. We got more viewers now than we've had for the last 5 minutes.
Well, I mean, first, it's I am unopposed. But if you're in Ward 3, you should be still voting because we do have a mayoral election at our election time. So, and that is just as important as council, if not more important, right? So it's important that you're paying attention to what's happening in that race. That not just on Facebook, but in the community, what people are talking about, and being engaged, and that especially on a small election, local elections are the most important day-to-day elections that you need to be engaged in because they affect you directly. They are the people you will be working with or could work with in the future. They're the people that will directly influence and change what happens in our city. So if you're not happy with the current candidates, or you don't know what's happening with the current candidates, they both have phone numbers and emails you can call, and I encourage you to do so because they are different candidates. But I encourage you to vote. Don't forget to vote because it likely will be easy for people to do that because it is a small city election, but it is the election that affects your life most drastically. So,
But hang on, I'm going to jump in real quick. You are unopposed, but if somebody did a write-in campaign and nobody voted for you, it is on the realm of possibility.
How dare you bring this up?
So people
Sure.
need to vote.
Yeah, people do need to vote, and that's incredibly important. But yeah, well, I mean, the experience I have, I mean, listen, I've run multiple businesses for the last 10 years. I've dealt exclusively with, the city governments, both Kansas City, Missouri, and North Kansas City, consistently. Sometimes on a weekly basis, certainly on a monthly basis. So I know how things work. I know my experience with people, both positive and negatives. It's not all been pretty, and part of that is why I want to do what I'm going to do, which is be a speaker box for my ward, my community, but also the entire community, because I recognize that North Kansas City is small. It's almost silly that we have wards, but I get it. All right, let's do it. But I want to represent everybody. I want to be able to hear everybody. If you have an idea, if you have concern, bring it to me. My business is in a different ward than I live in, so it all impacts me because I live here. I own a house here. I own a business here. But I think, the leadership. I have the knowledge of the community. I have, we were one of the only destination businesses for the first couple of years I owned the business, and that was trying. I'll tell you that right now. Like, it was incredibly difficult, but it was lessons learned. It's always lessons learned, and it's if you fail, pick it up and learn from it and go forward and be better next time. And I think all this education, certainly the education I've had in the last year from everything with the pandemic, but I think the leadership's there, my love for the community, my ability to listen, to be able to react, to handle multiple things at once. If there's one thing, anybody who knows me in my day to day, it's how much I'm consistently doing all at once. Like, there's not only do I have 10 tabs open, but I have 3 separate browsers with 10 different tabs. I'm opening 30 browsers, right? And I'm also doing this, and this in the background of that. And I have all these other things going. So I'm a great multitasker, which I think is important, especially in city council when you're going to be, hearing things from all sorts of different people. But, it goes back to all the way to high school when I was in debate, being able to listen to other people whose opinion maybe is entirely different from mine, and be able to understand it and interpret that, right? And without being angry, right? That's the thing. It's so easy, especially with social media, to just get angry at people's opinions. But be able to listen to everybody, regardless of if I agree with them or not, and then do the research, do the education, and make an honest answer based on that. Because sometimes it's not always going to be about me. Maybe I disagree with something that I know I have to vote for because it's good for the community, and I don't know what I disagree with, but I'm just going to throw that out there. But maybe it's overwhelmingly positive, and so maybe it'll make sense that I have to be the bigger council person and vote for something that maybe goes against my own beliefs. But we'll see. Certainly, I have my own convictions, and I'm a medium hard-headed guy, but I will always listen, and I could be molded. Certainly, that's one thing I think I pride myself on with my friends is I will listen, and I will engage, and my opinion might be totally different at the end of everything.
So, comment from Facebook, Jesse Smith says that he learned a lot about leadership from you during the pandemic. So, well done.
Well, that's probably because we were on the same softball team, and pitched terrific games and took us to the championship twice. So I'm sure that's what he means.
Yeah, but I will choose to believe exactly as he's written it. Um, so two-parter here. What prompted you to buy the theater? And are we going to have Back to the Future movies outside this summer?
Um, yeah, so the theater thing is a weird thing, but yes, Back to the Future is going to happen outside. I think 1 and 2 will happen outside. But the theater is a little bit longer-winded of an answer. It's basically, I took over the theater when I was 26. I never worked in a movie theater, but I had made movies. I've been a filmmaker since I was 15. And making movies is actually kind of where I learned how to be a businessman, and where I get, I think, my leadership from. Because making movies is very similar to running a business. I didn't know that at the time, but putting the pieces together all is incredibly similar to running a business and leading that team to success, right? But I had a pure love of movies, and I had a pure distaste for working for other people. And I didn't really understand that until I was like 25 or 26. But I'd done all sorts of jobs. So as I mentioned before, I literally did a million different jobs throughout my life up to when I was 26. Everything from, I was in the fire academy for a little bit. I had done construction. I had done, I worked at a grocery store. I worked at a big box store. I was at H&R Block corporate offices for a while. I was at Sprint corporate offices for a while. I kind of did all these weird jobs, and I wasn't happy or satisfied with any of them. And then I fell into the theater business. And it really organically happened. The guy who was running it was kind of at a dead end. The theater was kind of flailing. He didn't really know what to do with it. It never really found its cushion, right? It reopened in May of 2008, and I took it over in August of 2012. And I had gone to the theater, and I saw the prospect of something cool there, but it was just missing something. And what was missing was somebody who really had a vision for their own business. And it was just that. It was like, okay, well, let's just put myself as much as I can into this business and try to make it successful, and hopefully people connect with that. It certainly wasn't as easy as that, especially when I learned, like, well, there's no other businesses around me. We had First Watch across the street, and we had Lamond, rest in peace. I wish he would come back. But that was about it. Like, North Kansas City wasn't anything. At the time, Denim and Diamonds was still kicking, but there, Wild had just opened around that time, and it was like no breweries. You had a couple dive bars. That was kind of what North Kansas City was kind of for me, is like these cool little weird dive bars. Which I appreciated, but there wasn't any like destination businesses. It was mostly locals hanging around. So I took over the business and learned a whole lot. And from there, we built Tapcade, which was our arcade. And then we had a second Tapcade up here for a while. That we expanded the theater. We had a pop-up bars. We've had a bartending company. We've kind of done all these things. I founded a film fest here, which is a worldwide recognized film fest, and yeah, it just kind of dominoes kept falling forward. I don't know, like every time something would be successful, it would lead to something else. And this was, 2020 was the first year we didn't open another business. We closed the business, but we really refocused our attention. And I think, it all goes back to the positives out of the craziness of last year. And, I'm certainly thankful that we're still here. I'm still self-employed. I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary of not having a real job, which is cool. But yeah, that's kind of the journey there. And then, naturally you gain all these things, being a boss. I hate when people call me the boss, but, being the people that people look for answers. And that's the same thing on like film sets when I'm working on sets, directing stuff. It's okay, what do we do? What's the timeline? What's, engaging with all these different pieces, and being able to multitask and not freak out or break down, and keep going forward until it's done, until the work is done.
Ooh, this hour has gone by very, very quickly, so I'm going to end with one question. Now, there's a rule to this question. You can't use a previous answer.
Oh, okay.
What are your 3 favorite things about North Kansas City that you have not already mentioned?
Well, listen, Mindy, I already mentioned everything. Entire city here. But let me see if I can find unique ways. My 3 favorite things. Okay. So I don't know. It's going to be very tough because I burned through just about everything I love in the city. Okay. So I will phrase it very specific, because that's going to be able to rework it. So the thing that desperately made me want to purchase a home here was when I first lived here in City View, and I would walk down the side streets, the avenues, and it was like I'm an October baby. I'm a Libra, but I'm obsessed with autumn, as I mentioned. And I remember that autumn, which was it would have been 2010, and I was walking down the avenues, and I remember it was like almost perfectly silent. There was like it had rained like just a drizzle, and the pavement was perfectly like shimmering, in its black, and the lights were orange, and the leaves were like gently falling. And I remember that moment specifically. I was like, oh, I have to live here. I have to move in this city. This is like what I always dreamed about living as a kid. It literally like felt like a Halloween film or something. It was just so picturesque and like crisp and beautiful and perfect. And I vividly remember that. So number one was that picture perfect moment. Number two, listen, I love me some good burritos, and I love me burritos to go. I love it in the mornings. I love it in the afternoons. I love it all the time. It is terrific. It is great. And then I guess, because I can't use so many of the things I've already mentioned. Oh boy. What have I not used? Okay. I mentioned dive bars, but I didn't mention the best dive bar in my opinion in all of the city, and that's Helen's. Oh, Helen's. That's the time spent there are aplenty. They have a good dartboard, which I love. They have the shitty bar games, the touch games. Great food, and it's just like so personal and great. I don't know. Like Christine's is a close second, but Helen's has my heart forever. So those three things, I would have said, walking around and hearing the football games, and just being on my back porch because my house is right next to the stadium. And there's a bunch of other stuff, the biking and parks and things like that. But those are three more specific things that were not mentioned
so far.
Yeah, there you
go. Because you're going to serve on council, and then you're going to have to run again, and then we'll have to do another interview.
I know.
So
I'm not leaving, so I guess it's just either I retire, right? And maybe some young hotshot comes up and takes wants to take the council position in Ward 4 or Ward 3.
You got it, because when you put your name in the ring, I was like, whew, I don't have to run now.
Yeah, I know. There was a lot of people. I'm very curious what would happen if I didn't, because I had heard like 3 to 5 people that were all like, "Well, I guess I'm going to run because
nobody else is."
And they all messaged me like, "Whew, thank God, I didn't want to have to run, but I was going to run. But you got it." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you have confidence in me." But it was very funny.
And now you're unopposed.
Yeah. You were one of them. You're like, "Hey, I'm glad I don't have to do it." I'm like, oh man. All right. Well, but next time, Mindy, you have to do it, and I have to interview you. So you have to run next year.
I don't know about that.
Zach's like, bring it on. Bring on the me versus Mindy. I would love to see that. I would love to host the Clevenger Hart debate.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Everybody asks me, and I say, why would you want to curse me with that? So we'll see how you feel 10 months from now. See if you want to curse me that way. Just double checking. No other actual questions. Lots of great comments for you to look at when we get off. I want to invite everybody to vote on April 6th. This is the general municipal election. Typically, general municipal elections across the country are the least attended of all elections. But as we learned in the pandemic, our local leadership has the ability to pivot. They have the ability to help us in ways that the national representation doesn't have the ability to pivot. So the day-to-day lives that we need assistance with have more impact by our local representation than any other entity. So don't forget about the general municipal election, because as we saw with the pandemic, what happens in our local community, it matters how informed they are, how much research they're willing to do. Are they willing to look and think outside the box or blow up the box, as the case may be, to make sure that our community is taking care of both the residential and the business community? So please vote in the April 6th election. We're not through the pandemic yet, and there's still decisions to be made, and certainly decisions to be made about the growth of our community as well. We will be back. The schedule for the interviews is up on the North Kansas City Neighbors Facebook page, and I'll be posting the replays of these videos as well, so you can go back and watch or share with your friends that may have missed it. Adam, thank you. Thank you for being so steadfast and keeping Screenland Armor open and viable. It has been my favorite. I don't go to, unless I will say this. If a friend of mine who loves movies buys me a ticket at a different theater, I have to go. But if I'm choosing where I'm going, I only go to Screenland Armor, and if you're not playing it, it's probably not a movie I want to see. That's been my experience. Um, so I if it's not at Screenland, I don't need to see it, right?
I try to vet everything. Every once in a while, I have to show something that I think pays the bills. But yes, pretty. Unless there's like some crazy studio stuff, you're right. There's been a couple of examples, and you're so funny. Every time you would come in and be like, "I'm sorry, you didn't play this movie, but I can't not tell you that I had to go to the AMC." And I'm like, "It's fine, Mindy. I didn't play it. You don't have to apologize to me for going to see a movie I didn't even play." Yes, you've been a day oneer. You've been there before I was even there. So I appreciate your support and for doing this and taking many hours out of your time to host all these events.
Well, thank you for your time and for your willingness to serve our community for the next 2 years. We got you. Good
Two
night.
years.
Good night, everybody, and be sure to stop in and get some popcorn and watch a movie at Screenland. But most importantly, get to know Adam a little bit, because in this size of a town, yeah, he represents Ward 3, but it's 4 square miles, people. He's gonna represent us all.
Yep.
Good night.